Good morning, everyone. Today is 20 April, the year 2005. I'm Dr. Dave Thompson, a volunteer at the Palm Springs Air Museum here in California. Part of our mission is to record and preserve the history of our country's military conflicts, especially World War II. As part of the Veterans History Project of the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., we conduct interviews of veterans and civilians who participated in those conflicts. Today, I'm here at the museum along with fellow volunteer Les Carlisle, and today we have the honor and the privilege of interviewing Corporal Norma Streeter. Corporal Streeter was in the Women's Marines, in the Women Marines during World War II. So we're going to talk to her about that and a lot of other things. Norma, nice to have you here,
nice
dear.
To meet you.
Now, first of all, would you spell your full name for us, please?
Norma, N-O-R-M-A, maiden name Emich, E-M-I-C-H, Streeter, S-T-R-E-E-T-E-R.
Okay, and when and where were you born?
I was born in Fresno, California, March the 20th, 1924.
1924. So you're a native Californian then,
yes,
huh?
I am.
And what was your father's name?
Frederick Carl Emich.
And what did he do?
He was a printer by trade.
And how did he end up in Fresno? Or was he born there too? Or
No, both my parents were born in Russia, in a German community that had migrated from Germany to Russia when they were trying to bring in tradespeople into that area. I don't recall exactly the name of the city, but that's where they were both born.
Oh.
And migrated then to the States. My mother was 3 years old when she arrived, and they came in through Galveston, Texas.
Oh gosh. They so about what year was that they came? Do you know?
Well, let's see. My mother was born in 1897, so she was only about 3 or 4 years
Around
old.
the turn of the century, then.
Yes.
And do you know why they came here, or why they left Russia?
Well, they had heard that opportunities were better, things were better in the United States, and other relatives had immigrated earlier and evidently had contact and found out it was.
Yeah. And did they come straight to Fresno when they came?
Well, they came into Galveston and then straight to Fresno, yes.
Did they have relatives in Fresno?
There were other relatives, and each family settled on a different street.
Oh.
So they wouldn't all be in one street. It's kind of
see.
interesting that they did that.
Yeah.
2149 Clerk Street, Fresno, California. My grandmother had this home there, and behind that they used to call bock houses, where they did their baking because Fresno gets rather warm in the summertime.
Oh.
And I was born in that little bock house.
And was his family into printing over in Russia before? Is that how he got into that?
He must have been, because as far as I can ever remember, that was his trade.
Okay. Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have a brother. He lives in Hayward, California, and I have a sister.
Oh, and what was their names?
Arthur Arnold Emich is his name, and my sister was Edna Mae Emich. She's now Parker.
Okay. And your mother, what was her name and her maiden name?
Oh dear, now I gotta stop and think. Well, Dio was Dio, D-I-E-O.
Okay, and her first name was?
Catherine, with a C.
Oh, okay.
I remember that.
Catherine with a C. Yeah, I have a daughter named Kathleen with a C, and most of them's K, you know. I think that's kind of the German spelling. It was the C as opposed to K, as more Irish and stuff like that.
I believe.
Probably in Catherine too. So, do you remember what school did you go to? Grade school.
My father was a printer by trade, and evidently he couldn't find too much in Fresno at that point, so they moved up into the mountains of Westwood, and he went into a lumber company where they had their in-plant printing facilities, and so they must have been there a couple years, but as I recall, the best of my knowledge is, it was time for me to start school, and they knew living up there in the mountains, the school facilities were not the best. So that's when they moved to San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
And so that's where I started school. I went to the Grattan Grammar School, but I was only there a couple of years. And then my folks bought a house by the Mission Dolores Park at 71 Hancock Street in San Francisco, which is just down the street, so to speak, from the Mission Dolores Park. And so when it was time, so I went into the second grade at the Sanchez Grammar School. So I'd walk out the front door and make a left turn and go to the corner and walk 2 blocks to the Sanchez Grammar School. And when it was time to go to the junior high school, which was the 7th, 8th, and 9th, Everett Junior High School, I came out the front door and walked right and walked the 2 blocks to the Everett Junior High School, because there are 2 schoolyards backed up each other. This is out in the Mission District, or NOAA Mission District in San Francisco. Someone's familiar with it. And then from there, I walked out the right door and just walked 1 block down to the Mission High School, which Mission Dolores Park sort of fronted, or the Mission High School fronted the Mission Dolores Park.
Did and I know it was probably during the Depression when you were going to school. Do you remember what that was like? Was that hard on your family, or?
Well, I can remember very distinctly that my brother and me, you know, like all kids, we like candy, and so my mother gave us a dime. And she says, okay, you go down to the corner store, which in those days we had these little corner stores, and she says, you buy a loaf of bread. And she says, with the penny you have left over, she says, you can have candy. Well, we just thought that was heaven. For the penny, 9 cents for a loaf of bread. You look at what 1 penny's for bread today.
Yeah.
But I can remember that.
But your dad always had a job?
He was a printer by trade.
So he always,
and so when we moved to San Francisco, he found a job. At that point, of course, we're talking 1930, 1929. We were German, of course, and so he found a printing job with the German newspaper that was being printed in San Francisco at that time. And that's what he did, worked on the German newspaper.
Did you speak German?
Well, a little bit.
Now, your parents, did they speak English or German most of the time?
Half.
Yeah. I'm from southern Indiana, and a lot of German people, and in fact, there's a German township that I lived in, so most of them. And I remember my grandfather, we lived out in the country, and we'd be walking out in the field or something, and he'd say, oh, I remember that old Dutchman that used to live over there, or that old Dutchman, and I started thinking, golly, I don't know many people from Holland around here, but what he was saying was Deutschman. They call him Dutchman.
That's another phrase.
Yeah. Did you like school, or did you have certain activities that you were interested in more than any when you were in school?
I really kind of liked school quite a bit, so I had pretty good grades. That was kind of important to me, because I really wanted to go on to college. But unfortunately, my parents broke up in my last year of high school, so that kind of changed that whole routine.
Yeah. I was also going to ask, did you have a certain church you went to? Was you very religious?
St. Matthew's Lutheran Church.
Okay.
We'd go over by the old Mission Dolores. It was just around the corner from the old Mission Dolores, which was, what, 18th and something, I forget exactly. But here was the big Mission Dolores Church, and you walk around the corner, and there was the St. Matthew's Lutheran Church.
So your parents, obviously in Germany, were Lutheran, or their family was Lutheran, and even went to Russia, still continued that that tradition there then, yeah.
My knowledge was that they knew the Germans were good business people, and that's why they were enticed or invited over to this portion of Russia to start some businesses.
Yeah. And do you remember what you were doing on December 7th, 1941?
Well, I had graduated high school June of 41, and so, and then my parents had just gotten a divorce in December before that, so that was kind of an upheaval. But my brother and I were in the living room, and we were living on 280 Diamond Street at that point. We had to move out of our house. And we had the radio on, and all of a sudden, I can remember hearing this, that Pearl Harbor had been bombed.
Did that come as a shock to you, or were you kind of up on world affairs and things, or what?
Well, I wouldn't say it was a surprise, of course, but I wasn't really up on world affairs. That I read the newspaper. Well, I don't think we received the newspaper at home at that point. You just listened to the news on the radio.
But you had already graduated from high school then?
I graduated in June.
So what were you doing? Were you going to get...
I was decided I'd go to, because I couldn't go to college right away, I knew that. So I went to business school and I was taking comptometer, and why I chose that, gosh only knows.
What is that? What is
That's
that?
like an adding machine.
Oh.
Old adding machine.
I really don't know why I did that, because I certainly didn't like it. Because I had taken typing in high school right from the very beginning, and I took to that quite readily. So somehow I guess I thought the two fit together or something. So anyway, after I thought, well, that didn't work out for me at all, I worked to a girlfriend of mine that I still have contact with. She lives in the Dalles, Oregon. She's in fact 2 days older than I am, so she kind of lords it over me.
What was her name?
Charlotte Bruner. Her name is Atkinson now, at the Dalles, Oregon. And what was I trying to say? I lost my train of thought.
Well, we were talking about you didn't care much for the adding machine
Oh,
stuff.
so she was working at Foster & Kleiser, which was, she had gotten a job there, which is the big outdoor advertising company at that time. You don't see the name anymore. So I said, well, I guess I'll get a job. I'm not fond of comptometer work especially. So she found it, they had an opening over there, and I went to work at Foster & Kleiser for a while, but somehow that didn't appeal to me too much either. It just wasn't my thing. So from there I decided, well, I guess, I don't know how I really heard about it, but I finally took a job at the San Francisco Port of Embarkation in the Signal Corps office. Well, that is where all the troops shipped out to go to the South Pacific. And so I worked in the Signal Corps office there at Fort Mason. I think they've changed the name now, or I don't even know if it's still standing. But I worked there until I knew I was old enough that I could join the Marines, which was 2 years away, 2 years plus. 2 years, yeah.
Now, did you have a boyfriend at this time or anything?
Well, these were where the boys shipped out to go to the South Pacific. So let's say there were well, there's one now and one then. What was I, 18 years old?
So why was it that you chose the Marine Corps to go into?
Well, that dates back to when we were living in our home on Hancock Street in San Francisco. The lady next door was a widow, but she had a daughter and a son. And the boy was in the Marine Corps. And he'd come home with a bunch of boys on their leave or furlough, whatever. And they'd have these gorgeous blue uniforms on. And I just thought those were so glamorous, etc. Plus the fellas were always real nice and everything. And so this is how I fell in love with the Marine Corps.
Les, did you think that your dress blues were gorgeous? And
Well, I never had dress blues like that.
Oh, you did?
I've been at 10:30 meeting, I'll come back.
Okay, thanks, Lester. Okay, so, but you were telling me that, what, at 18 you could have got into the waves or the wax?
I could have gone into the wax or the waves, but I just wasn't interested. I said I liked the Marines, and so here I'm working at the San Francisco Port of Embarkation in the Signal Corps. At that point, they
so
still
were they Army guys going through?
They were all going through to go to the South Pacific.
But no, were Marines going through too?
No,
or just Army?
No,
right.
just Army, just
Right.
Army. And so, I guess I kept talking about the Marines all the time. So by the time I turned 20, then I had to get a release from the Army to go into the service. And I remember him saying, Norma, he says, the only reason I'm getting rid of you is I'm so tired of hearing about the Marines. So he gave me a release. Now, I couldn't have signed in for the Marines if he wouldn't have given me a release.
Now, how far back do the women Marines date? When did they first start taking women into that branch?
It seems to me, I'd say it would be about a year.
Oh, just, okay, so it didn't happen in World War I or anything
Oh,
like
no,
that?
no. no. This is all
Oh,
World War
just
II.
right. I see. Yeah.
Well, we didn't have. Well, let's see. We just
Wait.
had nurses in World War I, didn't we?
I think so. I think so.
I mean, we didn't have the women's services, the
Prob-
wax the waves, and
Yeah, I
until
doubt. I
after
don't.
Pearl Harbor, as I recall.
Probably. I don't really know for sure. Yeah. Okay. So then, okay, so he let you out. And
So he signed a release that I could then sign into so I was sworn into the Marine Corps on my 20th birthday, March the 20th.
Oh.
Yeah, I went down, because I had everything lined up all beforehand, but they couldn't swear me in.
They had a recruiting station there in San Francisco?
Oh, yes.
Where was it?
Well, if I recall, it was down by the ferry building, but I'm not positive of that now. But I know that's then the day I was ready to leave, because then I was joined the Marine Corps. But then I had to wait until June before I was called to active duty. Even though I actually was sworn in March, I had to wait till June.
Okay. What did you do in between time? Just kind of waited around, or were you still?
Well, I was still working there, because I knew I couldn't leave right
Yeah,
away, and
right.
so I waited till it was, you know.
So where was the first place you went then?
Well, I went down to the ferry building, and we were all to go across the bay to get the train, all the recruits, to head back east. And that's where we got on the train, boys and girls. Boys were just coming in service. June, we go across the southern states. There was no air conditioning in cars or trains or anything in those days. So, if you can imagine going across the United States in a troop train with all these new recruits in the summer, the windows are open, so of course it was quite an experience just to do that.
Was the train have like smoke coming out and stuff like that with them?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
But it was the dust that seemed to.
Yeah. So did you go to camp with?
Went straight to Camp Lejeune,
Lejeune.
New River, North Carolina.
Right.
That was 6 weeks of boot camp.
How was that?
Well, that was interesting.
How many girls were in that boot camp?
I really have no idea. I don't recall that at all. I don't recall that. Because that part of the country during the summertime was not exactly the most comfortable.
No.
And the air conditioning was not known.
Were the drill instructors pretty tough on you?
Oh, I don't really remember that they were. It
Yeah.
just was something I guess I absorbed as part of the way it was done.
So what, was it mainly marching and all that kind of stuff?
Yes.
Or any weapons training at all?
No,
Yeah.
no, nothing like that. It was just marching, exercise, I guess, to build us up.
Right. And basically, we'll get into what you did, but what were the opportunities for? I mean, what did they want to use you girls for mainly?
Well, after we got through basic training camp, we sort of had selections that we could make that we had our interest. And so I thought, well, you know, here I'd been doing clerical work, I thought maybe I'd try something different. So one of the options was aircraft instrument repair work, and the school was in Chicago, Illinois. And I thought, well, that sounds kind of interesting for something different to do. And so, fortunately, I was given that and sent to Chicago, Illinois, to Aircraft Instrument School. And it was in downtown Chicago, in some building, and there was 20 waves and 10 Marines to a class. And I was in the second class. And so that meant the city of Chicago now had 40 Marine, no, 20 and 10, did I say? 30. So I was in the second class, so there weren't many Marines in Chicago. So whenever we got leave, and we lived in this building, they had made barracks out of it. So then when we didn't have class, we had certain hours we could go do what we want.
Was this in 1944 then? When you were
Yes.
In what months?
Well, let's see. I would say
It's the winter time?
in the winter time, because we'd have our green uniforms on.
You're going from San Francisco pretty mild to hot and humid, and then to the freezing cold in Chicago, so those had to be some shocks to your system.
Yes, because we did wear our winter. We had I guess at the very beginning we could wear our summer uniforms a little bit because we had the green and white seersucker, but then from there we went into our dress uniforms, which are the regular dark green. And what was kind of fun part being in Chicago when we were on leave, when we were out on leave, people didn't know, with 20 Marines in Chicago, they didn't know what we were. And they'd come up and say, well, what are you in? So that was kind of a interesting, fun thing when people walk up to us and ask us, well, what were we? Because Marines aren't too plentiful anyway, and then you get women Marines and put them in this downtown area of Chicago in this hotel they've taken over. And
so you lived in the hotel?
We lived in this building that they had taken over for the training of the aircraft instruments, plus that's where we slept and ate and et cetera, et cetera. And then when we were allowed free time, we're right in town, we go walking around, and it would be fun when people walk up to us. They just walk up to it, they look at us, and then they'd walk, well, what are you? So we were treated quite well in Chicago.
Yeah. Did you enjoy the training that you had, what you were learning about?
It was fine, but it really didn't exactly appeal to me. I'm just, I guess, not mechanically minded in that manner, so it didn't quite do for me. So when we finished our 6 weeks training there, and they said, well, these were the different options, and I thought, well, I think I'll go back into the clerical field and do office work. It's a little more to my liking than to do little instrument repair work or something like that. Because I've always been considered a pretty good typist, and I could kind of swim through that pretty easily.
Yeah.
So I was able to have El Toro chosen as the place then I would go to after the training in Chicago. And that was 6 weeks. And so El Toro was not yet completed at that point. So they sent us to North Island.
Okay.
And so here this little group of Marine, well, they had regular Marines there, but not too many either, and then the women Marines.
And North Island was in San Diego, or Coronado.
Correct.
There, right.
That is correct.
Okay.
And so, because we were there just temporary, till they finished
and El Toro was up by Santa Ana, near El
correct.
Closer to Los
Until they
Angeles.
were going to have El Toro completed, which was, I think, 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
And that was a Marine air station.
That is the Marine air station, which I understand is no longer there. I think it's big housing now. But the El Toro Marine Base was a big operation once upon a time. And so as soon as El Toro was, so while we were there at North Island, we were allowed to come and go just the way, as long as we were in uniform, to go into town, which of course this didn't go over very well with the Navy people, but all the Marines, that's the way we were treated.
Did you take the ferry?
Take the ferry to go over, back to the city.
Yeah, I told you I was stationed there 2 years, and they had the ferry. They just built the bridge the second year I was there, and they were building that bridge.
No, we took the ferry back and forth.
Yeah.
So we just kind of did some paperwork around down at the North Island Air Station because they knew we were just temporary. So I don't remember the time frame though that when El Toro was completed, and then we were all shipped up to El Toro, and that's then where I finished my tour of duty because then the war was over at that time, and they couldn't seem to get rid of us fast enough. I remember that. I mean, there was just no problem to get your discharge. They just wanted.
How many of you were stationed at El Toro then, in the end?
Oh, and in the end?
Well, I mean, towards the end, yeah, how many were?
Oh, well, I guess some of them somehow, maybe the older ones, or the ones that wanted to stay, had the option. But
No, I meant when you were working there, do you remember about how many of the girls were there?
Oh, we're at El Toro? No, I'm sorry, I don't. Because there was just...
And you were doing clerk, or were you...
Just clerical
For
work.
who, like in one of the offices or something like that?
Well, it was a big supply point, really, at that point, as I can recall. And we were there such a short time. because I was only in for 22 months, and the war was over, and then they were anxious to get rid of us as fast as possible.
So what did you do when you got out then?
Well, I went back to San Francisco, and this boy I had met when I was working at the Port of Embarkation had returned from the South Pacific. He had been down there 3 years. And so he stopped to see me, and of course we had been riding back and forth, et cetera, et cetera. And so he was,
What was his name?
Robert Jackson. This was my first husband. I had been writing to him, and he was from Puyallup, Washington.
Yeah.
And so he came by to see me. Then he went home to visit, and he got himself stationed at Hamilton Field, which is across the bay from San Francisco. So of course we kind of saw each other, and so then in June of '46 we got married, and he was only at Hamilton Field, I think, 90 days, and he got orders to ship to Europe. I said, "You just got back." Of course, now we had gotten married. I said, "You just got back." And he says, "Well, I got the orders." So, luckily enough, he put my name in right away that I could be shipped over with the first group of wives. Well, I wasn't on the first boat, I was on the second boat. And I arrived in Bremerhaven, Germany, Christmas Eve of 1946.
Oh my God.
We were married in June, he left in July, and then I'm waiting, and then I'm put on the train to go to New York, and Christmas Eve, it was a whole boatload of just wives and children going from New York to Bremerhaven.
Was it like a trip ship or something?
It was practically like that, because there were no men on board other than the crew.
Yeah.
It was all dependent wives and children going to Europe to be with their husbands who had been transferred to serve over in the occupation.
Was it a pretty rough crossing? I mean, that time of year, you don't remember much about it.
I don't remember that I got sick or anything. I know it was I was in a cabin with a woman with 2 kids. So, arrived at Bremerhaven, Germany, Christmas Eve. Well, I guess I should call it Christmas Day, because they had the trains all ready. I arrived at Nuremberg, wrote by Nuremberg, Christmas Eve, and we were together Christmas Eve. I mean, they had somehow done a good thing about timing it just perfect.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
that was really special.
So we were together for Christmas Eve, 1944.
And where was he stationed?
Well, Nuremberg is where they were having the war crimes.
Oh yeah, right.
And he was wrote by Nuremberg. It was a little blurb, you know, like from here to Coachella, let's say, something like that. It was a little town outside of Nuremberg. And he was still in the they were still Signal Corps at that time, wore the Signal Corps insignia. And
were they there because of the trials that were going on?
no, they had nothing to do with
they
the
were just
trials. They
happy
were
to be
like
there.
a supply station or something like that. And I have to be careful how I say this. The troops were all black troops, and the officers were all white at this time frame.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting to see the way the German girls received a lot of things from and made friends with a lot of the enlisted people because of the advantages that they received from them. But we were there in, wrote by Nuremberg, was about 1.5 years. That's where I learned to drive. He bought a Jeep, found a Jeep that we bought, and that's how I learned to drive in a Jeep, one of these open Jeeps that we had back in those days.
Yeah.
And then they closed that, and we were sent down to Munich, but we were only there a short time in Munich. I don't remember too much about that. And
What was his rank then, or rate?
let's see, at that point he was a captain.
Oh.
And
So he had the black troops under. He had some black troops under him. How did that work out for him?
well, he didn't have any problems with it that I could see, but because I guess to all us wives, to see the German girls really accept the colored boys, but that's because they were given all these things that the soldiers could get for them.
Yeah.
Hose, candy, soap, and
Yeah.
but you know, back in 46, this was kind of still a
Yeah.
little different thing, and
Right.
today one doesn't think anything of it, but back then it was a little different.
Yeah. So where did you go from Munich then?
We came back to the States because I was pregnant, and so we ended up at McCord Field in Tacoma, and so our son was born at Madigan General Hospital in McCord Field, and then from there we went to Colville, Washington. It was a transfer, and then from there we ended up in a little old place. It was on an early warning site, because they did finally, when we were in Europe, say they could all start, they'd take away their signal corps and everyone become Air Force, and they'd all wear wings. And so from McCord Field, then he was sent to we were sent to Colville, Washington, like early warning site. And then because he had gotten a promotion, he was sent up into Montana, on the border of Montana, up above Great Falls, to take charge of that early morning site up there. And then he had this accident, which was unfortunate, so my first husband passed away.
Oh, he did. Oh, I'm sorry.
So,
was it an airplane crash or something?
no, it was an automobile accident, unfortunately.
Had he planned on making a career?
He was a career, because at that point he had 16 years in.
Oh,
So that was quite a surprise. I mean, to have that happen at that point.
Were you living up there too?
Yes, we had sort of just arrived up there, but we had a place to live, got ourselves settled, and he had to go back to Great Falls for a meeting for all the officers, commanders, or whatever the title was. I don't recall that. And during that time down there, he had an automobile accident.
That early warning site, was that like a radar, or you were, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How did that work? I mean, did you know much of how the intricacies of it? Just you knew that.
I never knew anything about it, really.
Right, yeah.
But that's what they had along the borders up there,
Sure, yeah.
and that was
That was a big,
part of his.
big thing back in those days, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So had you had your child before
Yes,
he
we had
passed
a little
away?
boy. He was born in 69. I say 49. 49. And so that was in 52, 53.
When he passed away.
When he passed.
And your little boy, what's his name?
I have Robert Earl Jackson. He was a junior. And so that was the family. They wanted to have him called after his dad. And I said, well, I don't mind that too much, but if his grandfather's called Earl and his dad is Robert or Bob, we're not going to call him Junior. So I will agree to naming him a Junior, but he will go by his initials, R.J., meaning Robert Jackson or Robert Jr.
Oh, yeah.
And so everyone agreed, and so he was always known as R.J.,
Okay.
which of course to many people would
That
say,
was...
oh, you are? I mean, R.J. I'd have to explain. His initials, R.J. for Robert Jackson.
Yeah.
But as far as the family was concerned, and we got no problem
Yeah,
then, because like
yeah.
I say, his father was Bob and his grandfather was Earl. So.
Now, were you working at all during this time when you were
No,
married?
I was a mother, housewife,
Yeah,
doing my little...
So what did you do then after your husband passed away then?
Well, I came back to California with my son, and so my father had a printing, he was living in Hayward, and my mother and sister were in Fresno, but things weren't doing well for them down there. So I came to Hayward where my father was in business. He was a printer by trade and had a print shop there, and my brother worked there also. And so I bought a house in Hayward and brought my mother and sister up to live with me and son. And so that worked out quite well, and I kind of then became familiar with the printing business because I did all the paperwork for my father, and then learned, of course this is way back before computers now, so this is all that hot metal.
Yeah, you probably talked to Bob Andrade because that's what he did, you know, and he knows back at like you guys
so
did.
This is before coal type. So I worked for my father and learned that trade, and that's how I met then my husband, and because he was then a printer and had known my father from previous, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I worked in the printing industry, and we had our own print shop for a while. And then, which was all this hot metal, which is the only way it was in those days. Well then, coal type, which is what we called it. American Type Founders came in with a machine that you could punch a tape, like a teletype machine, and you could set your copy and punch this tape. Then you'd put this little, like a phonograph record or miniature CD disc in another machine, which was a photocopy thing, and it read this tape and it printed it on this paper. You take it into the dark room then and develop it. Then you'd sit and paste it up together, and that's how you went from hot metal to coal type, which of course today is absolutely so far-fetched from me from the way this was back in those days. So we had our little print shop, and then with the change, the way things went and so forth, etc., we ended up working at the Oakland Tribune for the newspaper there. And that was when William Nolan still owned the paper. And our son was going to school. And so we had, he was ready, he had graduated high school. So he came to school down in Pasadena. So we had come down, and his roommate from Culver, where he had attended school, also came down to school in Pasadena, and his parents lived in Tujunga, so we became friendly. So when we'd come down, they'd even invite us to stay with them, and then we'd say, well, let's go out to the desert. And so we'd come out here to the desert, and that's how I first came out.
What year was that you first came out here?
Well, let's see. If he graduated school in '66, so backtrack 4 years, that's '62. No, 60, I take it back. He graduated '66 high school, so '70, he came out here, '70, and went to start school. And so we'd come down from the Bay Area, Hayward, where we were living, and his roommate's parents, we'd match up, and we'd come here to the desert and visit the desert, and I thought that was perfect.
Now, your husband, when did you all get married then, your second husband?
'56.
'56. And what's his name, or what's his name?
Charles Douglas Streeter.
Okay.
And he was very good. And as I say, I met him through my father's business. He never had any children, so he was really good to RJ, my son. Never objected to anything. I can really vouch for that. And RJ had a good education. He went to Culver Military Academy. He graduated from
That's back in Indiana, right? Yeah.
Private school, so
yeah,
you're familiar with that.
Oh yeah, I know. I'm from Indiana, so
well, then
I know
you know
about
that cost a few extra dollars to do that.
Absolutely.
And Chuck never opposed to that. And then from there, he came out to Caltech, graduated from Caltech, and did his grad work at UC Santa Cruz.
What does he do now?
He's now in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Unfortunately, I'm not too pleased with him at the moment.
Not a lot of scientists in Santa Fe.
So that's not the best subject. occasion, but
Yeah.
he did. Well, he worked for the Space Science Institute in Baltimore, Maryland, for 15 years, and then he met this girl.
Cherchez la femme.
Which has not been my best subject.
Do you have any grandkids?
They had one mutually, yes, together, and then one did die. She didn't live very long. So then she gets the hair. This is my daughter-in-law.
Yeah.
She gets the hair they should adopt. Well, let's face it. My son was born in '49. And we're not talking about children, kids, you know, he's up there. And so, well, okay, one they can adopt. So Dylan was adopted, and he was brought over from Busan, Korea. And he was fine, no problems. So then she gets the wild hair, they need another one. And she has to go over and get it. And it was a 7-year-old girl. And they've had nothing but health problems. And, I mean, maybe her thoughts were good, but with all the children in the United States, if they wanted more children, maybe I shouldn't be saying all this, but...
Yeah, I don't know exactly. It might be, you know, strange as it may seem, sometimes I think it's easier. I mean, you have to go through a lot of hoops, I know, here in the States to adopt kids, it seems like.
It's a little faster process to bring them in.
I think, maybe, I don't know, but anyway.
Yeah, so, you know, with all the children they have here in the United States, but anyway, then they've had a lot of health problems with that too, so somehow that just, she doesn't like the way I do some things, so let's say we're not on the best of terms. So, she wants to be
like most families, so, sure. Now, is your husband still alive?
He passed away in August.
Just this past August? Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, he was just short of 28 days of being 95.
Oh my gosh. Whoa.
We got married in 56.
So
we
he
were
was...
married we were 40. Yeah, he was 15 years older than I am.
Okay.
Yeah. But he never quibbled anything about the money that was spent on RJ and all that time or anything. Well, he didn't have any children himself. And he was really good. He was good.
Yeah. And so, do you have certain hobbies, or what do you like to do these days?
Well, let's see. Monday, I'm out at the Coachella Valley Preserve. I'm a volunteer out there, and I love that because I meet people from all over the world.
Coachella
You don't know where the Coachella Valley Preserve is?
I don't think so. That's not the Living Desert.
No, that's completely different.
Yeah. No, I don't know. Where is that?
You cross the freeway. You know where Sun City is.
Yeah.
That's Washington.
Yeah.
You would take Washington and just follow it around, and it makes a left turn, or it curves left.
This is on the north side of the freeway.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, you're not familiar with it.
Well, I know that. I know. I've been to Sun City, but you just keep going
okay,
past
keep
Sun
going
City.
past Sun City.
Okay.
And you stay on that road, and you'll turn left.
Yeah.
And just you have to turn because there's nothing way. And you get to the first street that runs into it, and that's Thousand Palms Canyon Road. The sign on this side says Washington. The sign on the other side says Ramon Road. You've heard of Ramon Road.
Oh, sure.
Okay, Thousand Palms Canyon Road comes down into this intersection, which is Ramon and Washington.
Okay.
So
okay,
coming from
gotcha.
Washington, you make a right turn, and you start going up the road, Thousand Palms Canyon, and off, you'll pass one grove of trees on your left, then you continue around, it winds a little bit, and then off to your left is the Thousand Palms Canyon Preserve, and you have a big parking lot to come into. It is free, there's no charge to come up there, and it's on the earthquake fault. That's why it's so well known.
Oh, what's there?
All these groves of trees of California Folifera that received their water from the fault. Oh, you'll have to come
I will.
out there.
I'll have to do that. I'll have to ask my wife.
It's a great hiking area.
My wife's been here since 1956. I don't even know if she knows anything about it. She's never
Oh.
said anything. Yeah, I'll have to tell her. Yeah.
Well, she's been here a long time.
She has. She graduated from high school here in 1960, actually. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder if she knows Donna. I can't think of her last name right this minute. A girl that graduated from school that went to school here that lives out in Sun City.
Oh.
Donna. I hope I'll think of it. My memory doesn't do so good sometimes lately.
Yeah.
I get disturbed with myself.
No, I think you're doing great.
Oh, I really,
So,
that's
looks like
bothering me that I.
Looks like
Donna
you're
McNeil. Donna
Donna
McNeil.
McNeil.
Terry McNeil. Well, she's a widow too now. But she went to school here.
You see, yeah.
Of course, your daughter's a lot younger.
No, that's my wife.
Oh, your wife? Well,
Yeah.
yeah,
so-
she'd still be younger.
Yeah, she might be, yeah.
Because you're not ready for Sun City.
Could be. I'm 66, so good.
Oh, well, you're old enough then.
Yeah.
Because 55 is the...
Oh, okay. We did it. Yeah, well, it looks like your health looks good. And stuff.
I am very fortunate. I am very fortunate.
So how many days do you spend out there?
I'm every Monday morning, and then I belong to the financial, they have a lot of clubs out
Do you
in
live
Sun-
at Sun City then?
Oh, yes.
Oh, we have friends that live out there.
Oh,
That's
you
a
do?
wonderful place, yeah.
Well, this is our third home here on the desert. Backtracking a little bit.
Yeah.
After we'd visit the desert quite often, when RJ was in school in Pasadena, I said to Chuck, boy, I'd really like to move down there. And he said, oh, I says, well, because I love the desert. Even when we first came down through Mojave and down that way, I just thought that was all absolutely fabulous. So I said, I'd really like to move down there. And I said, well, RJ's, in school and so forth, that's not really any problem. And he says, well, would you really like to do it? I said, yes. So our friends from Tahunga had placed, we ran across Tri-Palms Estates, across the freeway, and everyone back in those days would say, my God, way out there. And so they put a coach on in Tri-Palms, and it had a little golf course, which the fellas enjoyed very much. And so we came down a couple times and stayed in their coach when they weren't able to come. And so we said, well, gee, I really like this. And so we bought a lot in Tri-Palms Estates, and we placed a coach on it. And we were working for the Oakland Tribune and commuting the freeway, even though we worked the swing shift, which was the odd hours. And RJ was in his last year of school in Pasadena. And so he said, well, would you like to try it? We can try it for a year and see how it goes. I thought, heck, why not? So I had bought a house on my GI Bill in Hayward. 3-bedroom, 2-bath, hardwood floors, fireplace, all the built-ins for $13,950 in 1956. And so I said, well, we'll sell the house, You know what those houses are going for today? $450. I almost forced my sister, but I really pushed her to buy one. It was a resale at $17,500 or $17,900. She's still living in it. At that time, she said, we can't afford it. Her husband worked for the telephone company all his whole life. So anyway, I said, I'd really like to live down here, and RJ was in the last year of school. And so we said, okay, so we gave up our jobs at the Oakland Tribune and said, we'll go down and try it. Well, in the meantime, we'd got our real estate license. And so we said, well, we'll go down and try real estate. And so we bought the lot, and the coach arrived. And we were going to sleep in it that night on the floor because our furniture wasn't coming the next day. Well, that night, the wind blew. I thought the coach was going to pick up and take off. Because this is 1969 when there was nothing over there. I thought, what did we get into? I'll never forget that. Our furniture came the next day. Well, we were there 7 years. 7 years. And we traveled Ramon Road to go grocery shopping to Alpha Beta up at Sunrise. That was our closest store. And every year we'd get a new windshield and a front end painted because that was standard procedure when you lived over here and the sand blasted you. The insurance company never gave you any trouble.
That's right.
Oh, that was, when I hear some of these people today, I think they don't know what sand is.
That's right.
One time, because we just had the carport next to the mobile home, we had moved ours off to one side, so we had double parking for our cars. But we had blowing sand one day. We had to get a little skip loader to take the sand out of the driveway. So anyway, after 7 years, I said, oh gosh, I think I'd like to get back into a house. So we had moved our little store, our lease ran out in Thousand Palms, and we thought, well, oh, and then we were supposed to build this little store down on the freeway. We bought a little piece of property.
What kind of store did you have?
We had a little market,
Oh, yeah.
but it had a little liquor license in it, so that really what kind of kept the mom and pop stores going.
Right.
With the little liquor license, but everything was fair traded in those days. So we had purchased this piece of property down on Cook and Cubic Road. There was no I-10 overpass at that point or anything. And people would sometimes find us up there on Ramon Road and say, you should be down by the freeway so we can stop and get something to drink or something. Well, the bank would not loan us the money. We had a certain portion of it. It's all we needed for the building, but they wouldn't loan it to us. They, I can't think of the word right now, what they do to certain areas that they don't want to loan in. We had the money for all the equipment and everything. We just wanted to loan. I forget right this minute what that word is. But anyway, they wouldn't loan the money. So we left our little store over there and came over to Rancho Mirage. And where the river now sits, there was a long string of little buildings sitting in there, strip mall-like type thing. There was the Palm Springs frame shop, and then we had the little store there, and then that's where the original Honeys started.
Yes.
And well,
we lived up in the Cove.
Oh,
so
well then
I know
you
exactly
know what I'm talking about.
What was the name of your store there then?
Mirage Liquors.
Oh, okay.
Was this,
Probably in there before.
well, you might have stopped in for pop or something.
Yeah.
So, well, when we left Thousand Palms and we took this lease over here thinking, well, that's when they were starting to build Sunrise
Yes.
and
Rancho Las Palmas.
the Springs.
Yes.
I can't think of his name right this minute. He used to come in the store quite often. And that's when they were starting. So we had all the workmen that kind of came around, and where the shopping mall is there on the other side, that was golf course. Desert Air Golf Course.
Yeah, I remember you used to buy it.
So anyway, so we wanted to get into a house. I don't know if this pertains to anything what you want to know, but
No, I did.
and so Bob Press, I'm sure you remember
Press
the
and
name.
Press.
Exactly. He was building these little houses around the desert, and so he was building where that big glass building is.
Kind of round.
Yeah. Back up there, I can't think of the name of it, Desert Drive or something like that. He was building some houses up there, and I'd gone up to see them. And I said to Chuck, gee, these are nice little houses, and I think they were $39,000 or $37,500. And so I'd gone up to see it, and I thought, gee, I really like this. And thinking, well, it was close to the store and all that stuff. And so Bob Press said, well, okay, fine. So we tried to go to the bank to get the money. Well, we didn't have enough income for them. They wanted more down payment and so forth and et cetera. So unfortunately that didn't work out, which now I'm kind of glad. Because then he says, well, Norma, since you like the view so much and you rave about the view, because at that point that big glass building wasn't there and you could look out
Oh, yeah.
see. He says, since you like the view so much and everything, I'm going to build some houses up in Cathedral City. I've got 2 on one street and 2 on another. They back up each other. And here we lived on the desert now 7 years, and I'm sorry to say we had never been up in Cathedral City because the name was not exactly the most desirable. So he takes me up to show me these 4 lots where he's going to build these little houses, and they were like this one in the Ranch Garage was 39, 37, and this was going to be only 31, something like that. And he said it's practically the same house, but it's up in Cathedral City. And so he showed me the 2 highest lots, which are on Charlesworth Drive. And, well, one was on the corner, and then the next one. And that was 1/3 of an acre. And he showed me that lot, and I saw the view, and I said, put my name on it. I looked out over Mission Hills and the mountains, and oh, fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. So, and he says, Norma, I'll carry the paper till you sell the stuff that you need and do it. And I thought, gosh, how good can a builder be, you know? I mean, my gosh. I says, okay. So he built this little 1,000-square-foot house for us up there. And the gal, as far as I know, is still living in it also that we sold it to.
Oh, yeah.
And you know what that house is worth about today? $4, $4.25,
Yeah.
$4.50.
Oh.
Oh, fabulous view. So he was real nice. He carried the paper back for us. So I mean, talk about being generous and good,
Yeah.
etc. Bob Press, I'll never forget him.
Yeah, yeah.
So we lived in that house 17 years. But there's just the 2 of us down here. So we had been looking at gated communities. But all these fees were above our range. So we just couldn't do that. So finally, had all this advertising from Sun City, .web, and so we said, well, let's go out and look at them. So we went out the day they had all the realtors, because at that point I had my broker's license, although I wasn't really working at it, but I did have a broker's license. So we went out the day before his grand opening, when he invited all the board of realtors out to look at his models. And he had 13 models for viewing. And I walked through every one of them. And we got down to the last one, and I really liked it. It's 2-bedroom, 2-bath. It was the smallest one they built, in fact, but it fit our pocketbook, $125,000. And I said, boy, I really like this house. And so we went home to think about it, and the next day was the grand opening, and we came back again. So we met this girl, Jan, who was a real estate agent, and we said we're interested in the little house. And she said, well, there's only one in the first group that's remaining for the model that you want. And then she said, well, because they started at $125,000, she said, well, that's going to be $5,000 more. And I said, well, $5,000, what's that for? He said, well, that's for the big block wall that sits behind it, and that's on DR.DAVE Drive. And I says, well, DR.DAVE Drive, forget that. I don't want to back up DR.DAVE Drive. I mean, you know right away that there's going to be a lot of traffic. I said, well, okay, if that's the last one of the first group, when's the next one? She says, the next one won't be ready till January. And I said, well, where is it going to be? So she pointed out, she says, it's back here in, how did she phrase it? High-end district or something to that effect. And I said, oh? I said, well, why? And she says, well, this street back here, do you want to hear all this?
Go ahead.
You got me going here and I can't stop. You're going to say, my God.
We got 2 more minutes before my tape runs out, so.
She says, it's back here in the high rent district. And I says, what do you mean by the high rent district? She says, well, this side over here, those are going to be all golf course lots. So naturally, you know what those prices are. And the street behind you, she says, that's Willow Ridge or West Ridge. I get them confused. And she says, the one side is all golf course lots also. And she says, this side up opposite that, which would be backing up this street I'm thinking about, they're all big houses, but they're not on the golf course. I said, oh. She says, so this street here, she says, Yucca Blossom, they're going to build some little houses on that. And I said, oh, that sounds kind of interesting. So she starts out with the first two. She says, the first two are going to be 60-foot lots, so that's more than we wanted the smallest house. See, there were 50, 60, and 70-foot lots. That's the way they started. Okay, so we're talking about the little house. So she gets to the third lot. She says, well, this is going to be a little house. I says, oh, okay. And she says, oh, just a minute. That's $2,000 more. I says, why is it $2,000 more? She says, it's 2 extra feet. I says, for God, what can you do with 2 feet for $2,000? I says, what's the fourth lot? She says, that's just a 50-foot lot. I says, put my name on it.
So that's what you have now.
So that's what we have. So we have the big houses behind us, which don't get me started on them because their landscaping is my I'm having problems with the landscape committee on that. And then we have 2 middle houses, and then starts the little houses. So we just have the very smallest house, which was $125,000. It fit our budget.
Yeah. And how long have you been there now?
Well, we moved in January of '69. Well, wait a minute, 63. What did 93? 93.
Yeah.
They opened July '92.
Yeah.
And we moved in January '93 because the first move-ins were October, and we came in January. My memory doesn't do as good as it used to.
It has really grown. I mean, it's just amazing.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. But I am so happy to be there.
Oh yeah, and there's all kinds of activities I know for anybody to do about anything you want.
Well,
seems like.
I work at because the Nature Club, originally it was the Conservancy Club, but now they call it Nature Club. So I'm at the preserve on Mondays. Then on we have a big computer lab. Have you ever seen our computer lab? Huge, huge.
So, yeah.
Now it's big, but it started out with just donated machines. I monitor in there on Thursday mornings. Then when the Nature Club has a meeting once a month, they attend that, and if they have an outing, like we're doing a special one next month, I join that. I'm in the hiking club, so I participate in the easier hikes where the boys aren't running along, my shorter legs don't move as fast.
Yeah.
And then I belong to the financial club just for information, and I think that's enough. Plus what other little things that come along.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
So I have ample to do. I do pretty well.
Good for you.
I do.
Okay, well I think we better wrap it up now.
I have really run off the mouth.
No, thank you, Norma. Thank you so much.
No, I really have gone overboard.
Well, it's so nice to have you here. It was just great.
Well, I'm just real pleased.